Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the Brazilian jungle, where the mosquitoes hum like tiny chainsaws, the air sticks to your skin like glue, and somewhere past the last power line, a man picks up a scalpel he was never trained to hold. His name? You don't know it yet. Most people still don't. But tonight, you're going to walk beside him into makeshift clinics, candlelit surgeries, and a legend that somehow lasted 30 years without a medical license. You probably won't survive this as a patient, but hey, as a curious traveler, you'll be fine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? I always love knowing who else is out there in the dark with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You first hear about him from a guy selling fried plantains at a crossroads outside Belém. He leans in, half whisper, half wink, and says, "You get sick out there. Ask for the doctor in the trees." Not a nickname you'd find on Yelp. So, you follow the dirt road, your flip-flops losing a battle against red dust and spiderwebs. There's no signpost, just a crooked arrow drawn on a rock, pointing toward a shack with tarps instead of windows. Inside, it smells like rubbing alcohol and something vaguely poultry. There's no receptionist, just a barefoot woman cleaning a scalpel with what looks suspiciously like sugarcane rum. Then he walks in. Average height, tanned like saddle leather, eyes like rain puddles after a storm. He's not wearing a lab coat, just a threadbare t-shirt that says, "Jesus was a carpenter." You wonder, was Jesus also a surgeon? He doesn't ask for your name, just your symptoms. Then, faster than your brain can process, he's lifting your arm, pressing your stomach, checking your throat. His hands are fast, rough, confident. Not gentle, but not unskilled either. You look around and realize there are no diplomas on the wall, no licenses, no certificates. There's a poster of the Virgin Mary, though, duct taped next to a dusty anatomy chart. That's when it clicks. This man has no medical degree, no formal training, no legal right to be holding a scalpel. But he's been doing this for years, decades even. And people come, every day. Sometimes it's for a cough that won't go away. Sometimes it's for infections that turned angry under the sun. Once, it's a man with a grotesquely swollen knee he limps in howling, and limps out sipping sugarcane tea, and promising to name his next child after the doctor. Whether he was actually cured? Well, that's another story. Locals say the doctor appeared sometime in the late 1980s, but no one remembers exactly when. One day he wasn't there, the next day he was, and he had scalpels, bandages, and a talent for making people feel better. Not everyone believed in him, of course. A priest down the road tried to warn his congregation, "That man is not a doctor, he is a liar wearing holy gloves." But the next week, when the priest's niece got a fever that turned blue and the hospital was 4 hours away, guess where they went? And she lived. Historians still argue whether he ever truly cured anyone, or if placebo, belief, and desperation were the real medicine. But even skeptics can't ignore the sheer number of patients who walked in broken and walked out. Well, walking. What's weirder? The doctor didn't hide. He wasn't lurking in shadows, mumbling Latin. He went to markets, blessed babies, attended weddings. Occasionally, he was even asked to deliver them. It's hard to say no to someone who once removed a fishing hook from your cousin's throat with a butter knife. The jungle accepted him. Government inspectors? Not so much. But even they didn't show up often. The clinic was just far enough, the paperwork just messy enough, and the locals just protective enough that complaints somehow evaporated. There's an old joke around here. If the jungle doesn't want you found, even GPS gives up. Maybe that was his trick. Or maybe it was the fact that he knew how to fix a dislocated shoulder with just a towel and a prayer. One patient, a retired school teacher, says the doctor once stitched up her leg after a machete accident. She offered to pay him with her pension, but he refused. Just asked for bananas. "The good ones," he said, "not the bruised kind." And that's part of his mystique. He didn't charge like real doctors. He didn't live like them either. His home was a shack behind the clinic, with a hammock, a rusted kettle, and a pet monkey named Jorge. Jorge reportedly helped retrieve gauze rolls and sometimes just stole patients' snacks. But the doctor's tools? Real. Old. Sure. scarred, but real. He cleaned them himself, using a process best described as folk-adjacent science. Think boiling water, lime juice, and the occasional flame. And somehow it worked. For a while, the jungle doesn't keep secrets well. Rumors trickled into nearby cities. A miracle worker, a back alley butcher, a fraud, a saint. Pick your flavor. One newspaper sent a journalist who fainted during a tooth extraction. The article never ran, but people kept coming, especially the poor, especially the forgotten. They didn't care if he had a degree. They cared that he would see them, touch them, help them. Because sometimes, that's all you need to be seen, even if the man looking at you never passed an exam in his life. And so you stay. Not because you're sick, not because you need surgery, but because you're curious. Something about him keeps you there, watching. And you wonder, how long can someone walk a tightrope over a legal abyss and never fall? You're still sitting on the creaky wooden bench outside his jungle clinic when an elderly woman nudges you with her elbow. She has half a pineapple in one hand and a wrinkled photograph in the other. She holds the photo up like a holy relic. It shows a younger version of the surgeon, grinning with his arms around a sobbing man in a wheelchair. The man's legs are twisted, bones warped like vines, but the joy in his face is unmistakable. Before, she says in Portuguese. Then she flips the photo. After, same man standing barefoot but upright, in front of the same man with the same grin. He made him walk. You nod, unsure what to say. You've heard stories like this before. Everyone has. Healing the lame, draining tumors, fixing broken backs. But you also notice the way she clutches her side when she moves. You wonder, did she see him for that too? The truth is, you're starting to wonder how this even started. Who was this man before the jungle anointed him? So you ask around. At a roadside bakery in Santarém, you meet a man who says he went to primary school with him. Back then, he wanted to be a priest, the man says between bites of cassava bread. But then he saw blood for the first time when his cousin chopped a toe off with a hoe. And instead of fainting, he laughed. That laugh, it turns out, became a signature. Not mocking, just unbothered. Like pain and blood were things that didn't scare him. Maybe that's what gave him the edge. He never finished high school. Dropped out at 17, apparently after punching a biology teacher for calling him illiterate with delusions. But here's where the story gets fuzzy, because just a few years later, the same young man was performing stitches on an injured trucker outside Altamira and charging money. Historians still argue whether he faked a diploma or simply relied on charisma and poor record keeping to sneak into the world of medicine. One persistent rumor claims he stole an old ID badge from a retired doctor and laminated it himself with melted plastic and candle wax. Another theory suggests a sympathetic nurse taught him the basics, quietly mentoring him at night while hospitals slept. But what's certain is that by the early 90s, he was already known as O Doutor do Mato, the doctor of the bush, and patients believed in him because he believed in himself. You watch him now, crouched over a man with a bandaged arm. His movements are swift but deliberate, like someone who's practiced 100 times in the mirror. He unwraps the bandage, nods, and begins cleaning the wound with water from a kettle that may or may not have been used for tea this morning. There's no assistant, no clipboard, just instinct. And yet, there's something almost theatrical about it. The way he pauses, just long enough for the patient to gasp. The way he says things like, "This will hurt, but it will also heal," as if rehearsed. You start to suspect he's not just operating, he's performing. At night, you sneak a peek into the back shack where he sleeps. There's a bookshelf filled with medical textbooks, all in Portuguese, all dog-eared and highlighted. Atlas de Anatomia Humana, Cirurgias Básicas. Even a tattered Merck manual, missing its cover. And then one shelf down you find something strange. A stack of old VHS tapes labeled Dr. Souza TV record. You pop one into a battered portable player. It's a recording of a Brazilian talk show from 1998. And there he is. Same grin, same weathered face, sitting across from a host in a shiny blazer. The crowd claps. The host says, "You have no license, yet your patients adore you." How do you explain that? He shrugs. If a man can build a boat and sail it without sinking, Does it matter if he went to maritime school? The crowd laughs. He waves modestly, almost shy, but his eyes gleam. This man loves attention. Afterward, he returned to the jungle, to the shack, to the tarps and the monkeys and the rusting scalpels. But for a brief moment, the whole country had seen him, and he'd smiled right into the lens. But fame is a double-edged scalpel. It was that interview, some say, that put him on the radar. Not just of journalists or prosecutors, but of real doctors, the kind with 7-year degrees in malpractice insurance. They didn't like the idea of a bushman stealing their patients or their headlines, and so complaints started to trickle in, first from city hospitals, then from regional health agencies. But each time someone tried to follow up, they hit walls. No record of such a clinic, too remote for inspection at this time. Patient refused to press charges. And that last one? That's key, because even when things went wrong and they did, patients rarely blamed him. One woman, whose brother died from septic shock after a poorly cleaned wound, told investigators, "It wasn't his fault. My brother drank too much sugarcane liquor before the procedure." It's a pattern you see again and again. Devotion, loyalty, sometimes desperation disguised as faith. You visit a nearby church where people have begun placing candles beneath his photo. Not Jesus, not marry him. There's even a handwritten note tucked under a candle that reads, "Thank you for helping my baby breathe again." You sit there a while, trying to process it all. You remember the textbook shelf, the TV interview, the rumors of a forged license, the chicken coop that doubled as an impromptu blood bank, according to one source. And slowly, a picture forms. Not of a man pretending to be a doctor, but of a man who believes so hard that he is one. The jungle starts believing it too. It's not about the diploma, it's about the performance, the confidence, the outcome. And maybe, just maybe, the jungle doesn't care whether you went to med school. It just wants to know if you'll stop the bleeding. You wake up to a rooster crowing, and remember, for the 3rd day in a row, that the rooster lives inside the clinic, perched on a shelf next to the tongue depressors, like a confused intern. The doctor doesn't mind. It's good luck. He mumbles through a mouthful of boiled cassava. He crows before every successful operation. Sure enough, patients are already lining up outside, forming a queue that snakes past the banana trees. Some come barefoot. One has an infant tied to her back with a faded scarf. Another arrives in a wheelbarrow, pushed by his teenage son. And yet, no one complains about the wait. You finally peek inside the operating room. Calling it a room is generous. It's more of a curtained-off corner of the clinic, separated by hanging bed sheets and mosquito netting. There's a table, wooden, tilted, held steady with a rock under one leg. No anesthesia machine, no vitals monitor, just a metal tray with tools that look like they once belonged to a carpenter. There's no ventilation either, unless you count the gaping hole in the ceiling. Still, the mood is weirdly upbeat. Patients joke with each other. Someone's brought a radio playing samba at low volume. A woman offers you a fried pastry. She says she's been coming to the doctor for years. He took out my appendix. "Through my side," she adds proudly, tapping her ribs. That catches your attention. "Through your side?" you ask. She shrugs. "He said it was faster, fewer bugs that way." And that, right there, is the paradox you've been wrestling with. His methods aren't just unorthodox, they're often borderline surreal. But the results, according to his patients, speak for themselves. Still, you've started taking notes, because something feels off. That afternoon, he operates on a young man with an infected abscess on his leg. You stand quietly in the corner, trying not to breathe too loudly. There are no gloves, just a splash of alcohol, a sterilized knife blade, and the patient biting down on a spoon. It should be horrifying, but it's not. There's something almost choreographed in the way he works. He hums softly, a lullaby. He moves with fluid assurance, cutting, draining, stitching with thread that may or may not be designed for human tissue. 20 minutes later, it's done. The patient is sweating, trembling, but alive. He thanks the doctor. Then he thanks God. Later, the doctor joins you under the porch. He lights a cigarette and leans back in a squeaky lawn chair. The sky is bleeding orange through the trees. "You see how he walked out on his own?" he says. exhaling smoke. That's what matters. You nod. But you also wonder about long-term infections, internal bleeding, follow-ups, aftercare. Concepts like post-op don't seem to exist here. Once a patient walks out, they're on their own. You ask him about this. He shrugs. If I had a team, we'd have follow-ups. But this is the jungle. There's only me. That's when you realize, this clinic, this operation, this everything, it's a one-man show. A performance as much as a service. And the props? Equally improvised. The sterilizer is a metal pot he boils tools in over an open flame. There's no autoclave. The sutures come from a fishing supply store. Gauze is reused if it still looks mostly clean. And the blood supply, when needed, has been rumored to include animal plasma. That last one? It's hard to confirm, but you do see a goat tied up behind the clinic with a suspicious scar on its leg. Historians still argue whether he truly believed in these methods or if he simply adapted out of necessity. But here's the kicker. He wrote things down. Not everything, but enough. He had journals stacked in an old bread crate under his bed. You flip through one when he's out collecting rainwater. Each entry is a mix of anatomical sketches, folk remedies, and invented techniques. One page is dedicated to mango poultice for surface tumors. Another explains how to estimate internal bleeding based on sweat radius and pupil size. You don't know whether to be impressed or terrified. One entry reads, Patient 43, hernia, midline incision, sutured with 14-pound line, survived. Right below it, in smaller handwriting, Patient 44, same procedure. Not as lucky. And yet the pages aren't gory or cold. They're oddly hopeful. There's gratitude, apology, even poetry. He ends many entries with a prayer. One simply reads, Forgive my hands if they fail today. By now, your brain is doing mental gymnastics. He has no degree, no oversight. His clinic violates every modern health code in existence. And still, people trust him. The key, you begin to suspect, is hope. He offers it like it's medicine. Better than aspirin, more powerful than bureaucracy. And it works, at least in the short term. You remember one man who arrived with his foot so swollen, it looked like a melon. The doctor drained it, wrapped it, then told him to eat papaya seeds and avoid walking at night, when the foot spirits are most active. The man thanked him and limped away. You asked him later, foot spirits? He just smiled. It helps them believe. That phrase sticks with you. It helps them believe. It's not about being right. It's about being trusted. And trust, here, is currency. You start seeing the bigger picture. This isn't just a rogue surgeon. It's a theater of survival, a place where rules bend because the jungle bends them, where people are so used to being overlooked, they'll take a scalpel in a chicken coop over silence in a hospital corridor. Still, cracks are forming. You overhear a woman sobbing behind the clinic one evening. Her son had a hernia operation last week. Now he's feverish, vomiting. She doesn't blame the doctor. She blames herself for not boiling the bedding. And then there's the whispers, from a young man with trembling hands who says he used to assist the doctor. He means well, he tells you, eyes darting. But sometimes, he guesses, especially when the swelling's deep. You don't know what to think anymore. But you do know this. The curtain he hides behind, it's not just fabric. It's belief, community, desperation, and maybe, deep down, a fear that if he stops pretending, no one else will step in. Because for 30 years, no one did. The rain starts suddenly, like someone flipped the sky upside down. Thunder shakes the roof of the clinic corrugated tin, patched with plastic and prayer, and the power flickers out. Not that it mattered much. You're already used to doing everything by flashlight or candlelight. But tonight, something's different. A patient has arrived, wheezing and drenched, his chest rattling with every breath. His family carried him in on a door ripped from its hinges, balanced on motorbike tires. His eyes are wild, and his shirt is stained with something dark and sticky. It doesn't take a trained doctor to see he's dying. The surgeon, your phantom host, rushes out, shirtless, feet splashing through the muddy floor. He barks instructions in fast, clipped Portuguese. Alcohol, knife, gauze, candles. You recognize the rhythm now. It's showtime, but this time, you can see the strain behind his eyes. He opens the man's shirt and mutters something about internal pressure. You think he says plural bleed, but you're not sure. What follows is a brutal, improvised chest tap, using a length of tubing from an old bicycle pump and a sharpened hollow twig. You almost gag. And yet, within 10 minutes, the patient's breathing eases. His eyes lose that glassy panic. His mother sobs into her shawl. A miracle? Maybe. Or maybe just a desperate man who's learned to make miracles look easy. But it's moments like this that feed the myth. You sit with the doctor later, under the eaves, drinking lukewarm mate. He doesn't brag. He barely speaks. Just stares at the ground like he's still seeing the man's ribs. How do you know what to do? You ask quietly. He finally looks at you. I don't, he says. I just try not to kill them. There it is, the confession. Raw, unpolished. Historians still argue whether he truly believed he was a surgeon, or whether it was all an act one that spiraled so far he couldn't stop. But you're beginning to suspect the truth lives somewhere in the middle. He was a fraud, but he wasn't a joke, because you see how people treat him. They don't worship him. They don't fear him. They lean on him. Like a walking stick with a cracked handle, maybe not ideal, but better than crawling. Still, even the most beloved walking stick eventually breaks. You begin to hear the other stories, the ones people don't share unless you ask twice and promise not to repeat them. A woman whose infection returned worse. A man who lost a finger, then a hand. A teenage girl who bled for 2 days after an IUD insertion. The jungle, you realize, is good at covering up these mistakes. They get buried fast sometimes, literally. You also start noticing a pattern. He never treats the same patient more than once for the same issue. If the lump doesn't shrink, if the fever doesn't go away, if the miracle doesn't stick, he gently suggests they seek help in the city. Not now, not in panic, but soon, eventually. A graceful exit strategy. But for now, let's talk about his specialty. Locals say he's particularly good at removing tumors, but not just any tumors, spiritual ones. You first hear the phrase from a grandmother carrying her youngest daughter, who's writhing from stomach pain. There is a spirit inside her, she whispers. It needs to be cut out. You think it's just superstition until you see him do it. He marks the belly with charcoal, lights a candle, then begins a strange chant, half Catholic, half something older. The incision is shallow, symbolic almost, just enough to draw blood. He whispers over it, places herbs in the wound, then stitches it up in 3 clean knots. The girl calms, sleeps. And the next morning, she eats rice with beans and asks for juice. It's eerie. Now, you're a rational person. You know this could be placebo, coincidence, or the power of a well-timed fever break. But still, you were there. And the phrase he said before cutting, you wrote it down. Corta o que não se ve. Cut what cannot be seen. That phrase becomes a kind of thesis for the man, because what he really does isn't just surgery, it's theater, it's ritual. And for people who've been ignored by doctors their entire lives, that matters more than penicillin. One night, he lets you flip through a small leather-bound book he keeps in a wooden crate. Inside are clippings faded, yellowed, some barely legible. There's one article from a 2003 tabloid that shows him beside a table with what appears to be a large, glistening mass. The headline screams, "Fake doctor removes demon from local man's spine." He's smiling in the photo, not proudly, almost sheepishly, as if to say, yeah, maybe it was fake, but he believed it. You ask him later if he remembers that patient. Of course, he says. It was just fat, but he stopped screaming after I took it out. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't explain. Just sips his tea and stares out at the fireflies. And that's when it hits you. The success of this whole operation, if you can call it that, depends on mutual performance. He plays the surgeon, they play the patients, and somewhere in the middle real or imagined healing happens. But don't mistake it for harmless, because every so-called miracle has a cost. There's a boy who never woke up after a tooth extraction, a woman who hemorrhaged during childbirth, a man who coughed blood for a week after being cured of lung spirits. And each time, the jungle absorbed it. No lawsuits, no headlines, Just another grave beneath the mango tree. Still, the doctor keeps going. Every bandaged limb, every stitched belly, every whispered prayer adds another stone to the myth. A myth that's lasted 30 years. You ask him what he'll do when he gets too old to operate. He doesn't answer right away. Then finally, "I'll teach someone, maybe you." He's joking. Probably. The next day, you help sweep the clinic floor. Or at least, you try, because it's not so much a floor as it is compacted earth with a dusting of sawdust and something vaguely chalky. He tells you it's to absorb blood. Same as butcher shops, he adds. Like that should reassure you. You're starting to see a new side of the operation. Not just the surgeries, the ecosystem that supports it, the bartering system, the offerings, the quiet devotion of the people who show up before dawn with bananas, eggs, live chickens, even hand-carved figurines. These aren't payments, they're thank yous. Gratitude, in its most tangible form. There's a woman who walks for 4 hours every month just to bring him guava jam. Her son had a seizure in the middle of the jungle, miles from any clinic, and the doctor poured cold water on his face, held his tongue, whispered into his ear, and, according to her, saved his life. The truth? You'll never know. But she believes. So much that she's given up her last wedding ring as tribute. That's when it really hits you. Faith is currency here. Maybe the only one that matters. And the price people are willing to pay for hope, well, it's staggering. You watch a man hobble in with a bone sticking through his shin. He's not screaming, just calm, almost reverent. His brother holds a sack that clinks with coins, buttons, and 2 bottles of sugarcane liquor. The doctor accepts it with a nod. No more than 30 minutes, he mutters. 30 minutes later, the bone is realigned, crudely splinted with bamboo, and the man is sleeping peacefully under a net that smells like mold and vinegar. No paperwork, no insurance, no consent forms, just trust. But not everyone pays. Some simply can't. A gaunt woman arrives with a child so thin it hurts to look. She has nothing in her hands. No food, no money, just eyes full of silent apology. He doesn't ask for anything. He takes the child, checks his pulse, and starts preparing boiled water and rehydration salts. Later, you'll hear him mutter that it's probably dysentery. But he says nothing to the mother, just strokes the boy's hair and tells her to sit. You ask him, quietly, how he survives when so many bring nothing. He shrugs. They give what they can. Sometimes it's not food, sometimes it's stories, sometimes it's silence. And sometimes, he admits, it's dangerous. There's an undercurrent here, a tension you didn't notice before. Not just the heat or the humidity, but a kind of social pressure that forces belief. You speak to a woman who once questioned his methods. She says it quietly, eyes darting, as if the trees might be listening. I said maybe we should take my husband to the hospital, she whispers. My neighbor stopped talking to me for a year. You try not to let it chill your spine, because if belief is currency, then doubt is treason. Historians still argue whether these kinds of folk surgeons thrive because of neglect, or whether they become part of the neglect itself. A loop, a system built on absence. The government doesn't come, so the jungle creates its own authority. And make no mistake, this man is an authority. Not elected, not appointed, but respected, terrifyingly so. People change their plans if he says so. Postpone weddings, switch medicines. One woman reportedly divorced her husband because the doctor said he had a slow sickness in the soul and would bring rot into the family. You ask him about that story. He chuckles. Rot is real, he says. Even if you can't see it. There it is again, that phrase, that worldview. Illness as a metaphor, healing as belief. And to his credit, he's clever. Sometimes, instead of pretending to know, he defers, sends patients to a nearby herbalist, or the local priest, or an elderly midwife who lives in a shack filled with frogs and photographs of saints. In his own weird way, he's built a referral network. You start noticing the little things he gets right. He always checks for dehydration by pinching skin. He counts breaths. He listens to the stomach, not with a stethoscope, but with his ear pressed gently to skin. It's both intimate and unsettling. You're reminded of something a real physician once told you. Half of medicine is touch, The other half is pretending to know what's wrong until you actually do. That's what this man is doing. Only difference? He's not pretending for your sake. He's pretending for theirs. And somehow, it's working. Until one evening, a young man stumbles in, face pale, one hand clutched to his abdomen. Blood seeps between his fingers. Something sharp glints under his shirt, maybe a knife wound, maybe worse. You help carry him to the table. The doctor lifts the shirt. The wound is deep, too deep. This needs a real hospital. You expect him to say that, to call it, to shake his head. Instead, he turns to you and says, "Boil water, we're going in," and then he begins. The man is half conscious, muttering in a dialect you can't place. You hold the light. You try not to breathe. The doctor cuts carefully, then faster. His hands tremble once, just once, but he catches himself. He reaches inside the wound and pulls out something dark. Tissue, coagulated blood, a clot. He flings it into a bowl, mutters a prayer, and stitches the wound closed. 10 minutes later, the patient's breathing slows. He's still alive, barely. You ask him, stunned, how he knew what to do. "I didn't," he says again. Then, quieter. "But nobody else was going to." And that may be the whole story. He doesn't operate because he believes he's better. He operates because no one else will. Because there's a gap where a system should be. And in that gap, for 30 years, he stood with a scalpel, a bottle of rum, and a prayer. You're eating breakfast, cold rice, and a hard-boiled egg when you spot something strange on the clinic porch. A chicken, wobbling slightly, wearing what looks like a bandage on its leg. You ask the doctor about it. He barely looks up. "Test subject," he says through a mouthful of papaya. "I practiced stitches on her last week." And just like that, the surreal becomes routine again. In this world, chickens wear bandages. Mango trees shelter open wounds. And the line between healing and experimentation is blurry, at best. But today brings a different kind of visitor. A man arrives in a pressed white shirt, sunglasses, clean boots, city shoes. Not a patient. A journalist. It turns out from a regional tabloid. He heard rumors, wants to write a story. You feel your spine stiffen. Cameras ruin myths. Truth kills legends. The doctor, oddly, agrees to speak with him. They sit under the tree canopy, swatting flies, sipping bitter coffee. You linger nearby, pretending to sort herbs but really just eavesdropping. "People say you've been operating here for 3 decades, the journalist begins, "but you're not on any official registry. No medical board, no university. How do you explain that?" The doctor leans back. "I'm not hiding," he says. "I'm here. If they wanted to find me, they would." The journalist presses. "But don't you think people deserve someone certified?" A pause. "I think people deserve someone who shows up." It's not a dodge. It's a mission statement. Later, when the article runs, the headline is predictably sensational. Phantom surgeon of the Amazon miracle worker or menace. But the story itself is oddly sympathetic. The writer describes the jungle, the desperation, the lack of infrastructure, the long distances between hospitals. And then he describes the doctor, not as a monster, but as a man who filled a void. Of course, not everyone is impressed. The piece draws attention, the wrong kind. 3 weeks later, a government health team arrives. Real doctors, real clipboards, real skepticism. They pull up in a dusty SUV with the seal of the health ministry on the side. This is not a friendly visit. The doctor doesn't run. He greets them politely, offers them water, invites them to look around, which they do with frowns, gloved hands, and sharp questions. They note the lack of refrigeration, the reused gauze, the sterilizer that's really a pressure cooker with the handle melted off. They take photos, samples, names. You hear one of them mutter, "How is this not a crime scene?" They threaten to shut him down. And here, for the first time, you see something new on the doctor's face. Not fear, not guilt, sadness, because he knows the game may finally be up. But then, the patients start arriving. As if on cue, one by one, limping, coughing, carrying infants, offering produce. They don't protest, they don't chant, they just exist, a living rebuke to bureaucracy. One man walks up to a health official and says, "When my appendix burst, this man saved me, not your hospitals, him." Another, "When my wife couldn't breathe, he held her lungs open with his hands." And another, "My son was going to die, now he sings." It's not a protest, it's a testimony. Historians still argue whether this moment was staged if the doctor told them to come, or if it was spontaneous. But no one questions its effect. The officials soften. They tell the doctor they'll be filing a report, that he must cease any and all invasive procedures, that future infractions could carry criminal charges. He nods, says he understands. They leave, and the very next day, he's back to work, quietly, carefully. No cameras this time. You ask him why. He shrugs. People still come. What am I supposed to do? Say no? You begin to realize just how precarious this whole thing is. One inspection, one complaint, one tragedy too big to bury, and it all comes crashing down. But the doctor is nothing if not adaptive. He makes small changes. He starts calling his operations consultations. He moves more procedures into the back, where they can't be seen from the road. He borrows a white coat from a local nurse just for show, and the patients keep coming. That's the thing that sticks with you. It's not that people don't know he isn't licensed. They do. They've always known. They just don't care. Because in the absence of systems, people don't wait around for paperwork. They turn to the person who shows up, who says, "Yes, I can help," even when the world says, "No, you shouldn't." You start asking yourself uncomfortable questions. What's worse, a trained surgeon who's too far away to reach, or an unlicensed one who holds your hand while you bleed? What is harm when the alternative is nothing at all? And what does it mean to be a doctor if not to help? There's a girl who brings him flowers every Sunday. He once removed a cyst from her ear using a soup spoon. Her parents couldn't afford antibiotics, so he made a poultice of crushed garlic and honey. It worked, or at least, it didn't kill her. Now, every week, she brings marigolds and daisies, tied with string. "You're like the jungle's heart," she tells him once. He smiles, but later, you see him bury the flowers in a hole behind the clinic. Maybe he doesn't believe the myth, not fully. Maybe it weighs too much, because this isn't just a man pretending to be a doctor. This is a man carrying belief like a burning coal, trying not to drop it. And the longer he holds it, the more it scorches. You're sweeping out the clinic's back room when a boy limps in holding his forearm, blood dripping steadily from between his fingers. There's a gash, a deep, ragged tear where the skin folded open like a page. The doctor takes one look and says, "Boar tusk. You can tell by the arc. No anesthesia. Just sugar, water, and a rag to bite down on." And you're holding the kid's shoulder while the doctor threads a curved needle through skin like it's burlap. It's horrible. It's brilliant. It works. Later, the boy's father leaves a sack of cassava as payment and mutters a thank you like it's an oath. And once again, you wonder, how is he still doing this? Because by now, whispers are turning into voices. A medical association in São Paulo releases a statement. No individual without accreditation should be allowed to perform medical procedures under any circumstance. A Brazilian senator even brings it up during a hearing on rural healthcare, calls the phantom surgeon a symbol of national failure, but he's also a symbol of something else. Hope, grit, resourcefulness, maybe even defiance. The media digs deeper now. Turns out he was born in Recife, raised by a single mother who died when he was 15. He supposedly worked as a janitor at a hospital. Some say he snuck into lectures. Others claim he stole textbooks and practiced sutures on fruit and pigs. Historians still argue whether he ever actually enrolled in a university under a false name. No official records exist, but there's that one blurry group photo from a 1983 graduation, where someone in the back does resemble him. What's clear is, he learned somehow, and he learned enough. You find a trunk in the back room one day, locked, dusty, stashed under a pile of old tarps. You ask him about it. "Tools," he says. You gesture toward the open tray on the table, the forceps, scissors, scalpels already in use. More tools? He hesitates. Then, from my old life. Later that night, after he's asleep, you pick the lock. Just curiosity. Inside, medical books, old anatomy manuals, a frayed surgical gown, and dozens of letters handwritten, dog-eared, faded with sweat. Most are unsigned, but you recognize a few names. They're thank yous from people all over Brazil. Some patients, some relatives, one even from a police officer whose daughter had a seizure in the middle of nowhere. That's the moment you realize the scale of it all. This isn't some jungle quack running a glorified first aid tent. This is a man with a national footprint. His legend grew not because he sought it, but because the state left blank spaces and he filled them. He tells you once, over a rare glass of cheap beer, in Brazil, medicine is a door, and most people don't have the key. You ask if he ever wanted to quit. Every morning. Then why don't you? Because they'll knock anyway. He nods toward the porch. They always knock. And it's true, even when dengue fever rips through the region, and the health ministry actually sets up a temporary clinic a few kilometers away, people still come here. To him, they trust him more than logos and latex gloves. He doesn't always save them. You've seen children buried, mothers weep, fathers age 10 years in an afternoon. But even when the outcome is tragic, no one seems to blame him. He holds their hands. He speaks gently. He shows up. And that apparently is enough. Of course, not all wounds are physical. There's a woman who comes regularly for stomach pain. The doctor examines her, finds nothing wrong, prescribes mint tea and a change in diet, but she keeps coming back, every week. Eventually, you realize it's loneliness. Her husband drinks, her daughter left, and this strange little jungle clinic is the only place where someone looks her in the eye and calls her by name. The doctor never sends her away. He listens. That's part of his treatment. One night, you catch him stitching up his own palm. Machete slipped, he mutters. Blood seeps through the towel as he ties off the thread. His hands are shaking, but not from pain. From age. From where, you ask. What happens when your hands stop working? He shrugs. Then I stop pretending. It's said like a joke, but there's fear behind it. And still, the clinic grows. Slowly, like vines. A new wooden shelf appears one morning. Someone built it as thanks. Then a second-hand scale. A local teacher donates a poster of the human muscular system, even though it's in Spanish. People start calling it the jungle hospital. Kids play outside, making tiny bandages for injured bugs. One of them wears a lab coat made from a torn bedsheet. A makeshift institution built on memory and improvisation, and all of it illegal. But who's gonna stop it? The police? They're stretched thin, underpaid, and half of them send relatives here. The real threat comes from a different angle. A powerful private hospital chain is expanding its rural outreach. One of its executives happens to read about the phantom surgeon in a viral thread online complete with grainy photos and personal testimonials. He isn't amused. Bad optics, he says in a meeting, according to a whistleblower. This kind of romantic nonsense undermines trust in real medicine. So they send a team, not health inspectors' lawyers, armed with cease and desist letters and promises of litigation. And this time, things change. Because courtrooms don't care about marigolds. You see the doctor reading the notice by candlelight. He doesn't speak for a long time. Then, well, they found me. The next day, he doesn't open the clinic. No patients are turned away, but the doors stay shut. And for the first time in years, silence fills the clearing. The jungle breathes around you. Birds return to the porch. Leaves gather on the empty steps. And somewhere in the distance, a dog howls long, low, lonely. You wonder if the myth has finally ended, or if it's just shifting into a new chapter. You wake the next morning to the sound of tapping. Soft, polite, not urgent but persistent. At the door, an elderly man with a bloodied bandage wrapped around his shin. Behind him, a barefoot girl holding her little brother, whose face is swollen with infection. And behind them, a line. 5, 10, maybe more. Waiting. Silent. The doctor doesn't even look at you when he walks past, opens the door, and says quietly, "Next." The clinic is open again, but something's changed. He's quieter, less sure with his hands. He checks the window more often, pauses before answering knocks. And every evening, he rereads the cease and desist letter like it's a map he doesn't quite understand. Maybe they'll forget, he mutters once. But even he doesn't believe that. News spreads. The phantom surgeon is back. Patients arrive from even farther away, now some crossing state lines. One arrives in a wheelbarrow, and so do the threats. A drone buzzes overhead one afternoon, too sleek for locals. It hovers, watches, then disappears. Later, a man in khakis and mirrored sunglasses parks outside, doesn't say a word, just takes pictures and leaves. And one night, a rock crashes through the clinic's window. You both freeze, glass crunching underfoot. No note, no signature, just a message made of silence. Historians still argue whether the phantom surgeon ever committed a formal crime. Practicing medicine without a license? Certainly. But harming anyone? Misleading them? Charging outrageous fees? None of that stuck. His ledger shows more donations than payments, and no patient ever filed a complaint. Still, the legal noose tightens. A court summons arrives. Official letterhead, signed and stamped. You need a lawyer, you say. I need a miracle, he replies. But this time, no miracle comes. The trial is scheduled in Recife, where it all began. Public prosecutors are keen to make an example. For every phantom surgeon, one says, there are a dozen quacks who do real harm. The doctor doesn't argue. He packs a small bag, wears a clean shirt for the first time in months. Before leaving, he stands in the clinic doorway and looks around, like he's memorizing the walls. You'll take care of things? You nod, even though you're not sure what things means anymore. He leaves before dawn. The trial becomes a circus. Outside the courthouse, protesters chant his name. Inside, lawyers toss Latin terms across polished floors. The prosecution calls him reckless, arrogant, a danger to public safety. The defense calls dozens of witnesses, mothers, farmers, an actual priest. All of them say the same thing. He saved us. No one else came. One woman holds up a faded photo of her son, tiny, covered in gauze, eyes wide. He would have died, she says, if that man hadn't shown up. Still, the judge is bound by law. The phantom surgeon is found guilty of practicing medicine without a license. He's sentenced to house arrest, 2 years, plus a fine, and he's officially barred from performing any medical procedures, even in emergencies. You find him on the porch afterward, his ankle monitor blinking softly. Feels heavier than it looks, he says, but the real weight is invisible. He doesn't operate anymore, doesn't suture, doesn't lance, just watches, advises. Occasionally, he'll whisper instructions while you hold the scissors. You become his hands, and you start to notice the gaps, the subtle expertise he used to apply without thinking, identifying an infection's edge, feeling for a buried shard of glass, making decisions by instinct instead of protocol. He sees you struggle once, gently takes over, but halfway through the dressing, he pulls away. I can't, he says. They'll take everything. So, he teaches. And this is the twist no one saw coming. He's a phenomenal teacher, methodical, patient. He draws diagrams in the dirt, uses plantains as practice skin, explains infection like it's a gossiping neighbor, sneaky, relentless, always looking for an opening. And slowly, the clinic evolves. It becomes less a place of one man's knowledge and more a school of collective learning. Locals step up. A teenager with steady hands, a retired midwife, even the cassava farmer turns out to have once been a military medic. You build protocols together, write them out, post them on the wall. Not perfect, the doctor says, but it's something. One day, a woman arrives with a dislocated shoulder. The doctor steps back, lets you handle it. Afterward, she says, "Thank you, doctor." And for the first time, you don't correct her. But even in this softer role, the phantom surgeon remains a target. A medical oversight board sends another warning. This time, they mention criminal contempt. You start using code words in patient logs, label surgeries as maintenance, list infections as surface incidents. Still, the clinic stays open, because illness doesn't wait for paperwork, and because people trust him. Even the new regional governor visits once, unofficially, with his feverish child in tow. The doctor hands him a packet of herbs and says, "Boil this, no charge." 2 days later, a new roof appears on the clinic. No one mentions it, but everyone knows. The phantom surgeon has become more than a myth. He's a system now, an ecosystem of care that exists in defiance of bureaucracy, built on sweat, memory, and community. And yet, the end creeps closer. His hands shake more. He forgets names. You catch him staring at his own charts like they're in a foreign language. You want to ask what happens when he's gone, but the words don't come, because deep down, you know. The jungle will whisper his name long after the last bandage is tied. The people he helped will carry his knowledge forward through stories, habits, and muscle memory. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it always was. You don't hear the truck until it's too late. It's mid-morning. You're cleaning the clinic floor, sweeping away a trail of dried mud, when the first one rolls in military green, dust-choked, heavier than anything that's visited this village in months. Then a second truck. Then a third. By the time you reach the doorway, there are men in vests, unfolding metal barriers. A drone circles overhead larger this time, with flashing lights and a hum that vibrates in your teeth. A man steps out of the passenger seat. He's wearing aviator sunglasses, slacks too clean for this place, and a badge clipped to his belt that catches the sun in hard glints. He doesn't smile. He asks for the man calling himself doctor. You hesitate. He says, "We can do this easy, or we can do it loud." So you point to the back room. The phantom surgeon is sitting at the table, reading a water-stained anatomy book. When he sees the badge, he doesn't flinch, just closes the book softly, lays it on the table, and says, "I suppose it's time." They put him in the truck, not in cuffs yet, but under the gaze of men who carry authority like a weapon. The villagers gather silently. No one speaks. No one protests. You're left standing in the dust, watching the road wind away. He's gone. This time, there's no trial, no public outcry. This time, they bury the story. The government labels him a repeat offender. He's relocated to a facility in Brasilia for assessment. That word alone, assessment, feels sterile, clinical, and terrifying. You write letters. No reply. You make calls. They're unable to disclose details at this time. Historians still argue whether he was imprisoned, institutionalized, or quietly relocated under a different identity. Some even claim he was offered a deal, teach under state supervision, in exchange for clemency. No one knows for sure. What is known? The clinic doors stay closed for exactly 3 days. Then, you unlock them, because people still need help. The mother, with twins who cough in harmony, the old fisherman whose knee bends sideways, the boy with the cracked rib from falling out of a mango tree. You do what he taught you. You feel the scar tissue forming behind your own ribs, grief layered thick, but your hands move with memory. Soon, others return too. The teenage assistant, the retired midwife, even the cassava farmer, who now teaches wound dressing with the same intensity he once reserved for yams. You call yourselves the Circle. The name makes people laugh at first, but it catches on. You write out everything he taught, procedures, precautions, fallback plans. You add diagrams, drawn in shaky lines on brown paper. The clinic walls are covered now, and one night, a stranger arrives. She's lean, sharp-eyed, with hands that move like they're always mid-suture. She introduces herself simply. "I heard about him. I want to learn." And just like that, the circle grows. People bring gifts. Not money, never money, but baskets of corn, firewood, bottled water. One woman brings a goat, ties it to the porch post like an offering. In return, the clinic stays open. Open when the electricity flickers. Open when the roads wash out. Open when officials stop by and quietly turn back around, realizing no one will talk. The myth of the phantom surgeon deepens. Now, there are stories that he once removed a bullet using a sewing needle and local rum, that he cured a man of blindness with touch alone, that he whispered to dying patients and they smiled as they slipped away. You know some of these aren't true, but you don't correct them, because stories like these keep him alive. Still, you miss him. You keep the door to his old room locked. Once a month, you clean it, dust the book he left open, straighten the stethoscope, Water the little potted plant that somehow continues to thrive. It blooms exactly once, a red flower like a burst of applause. Then one evening, you find an envelope under the clinic's door. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a single page, folded twice. It reads, in handwriting you recognize instantly, "Keep going. You're doing more good than you know." Nothing else, no signature. But you know. You sleep better that night. A few weeks later, the circle receives a visitor. Not a patient, an investigator. Quiet, academic. The kind who asks more questions than he answers. He wants to know how you're running a clinic without a licensed physician. You show him the protocols, the training logs, the improvised oversight structure. He nods, takes notes, leaves without comment. Then, months later, an article appears. It's titled, "Medicine on the Margins. Brazil's Unauthorized Clinics That Save Lives." It doesn't mention names, but it includes a photo of the porch, your porch. Historians still debate the legacy of Brazil's phantom surgeon. Some call him a reckless outlaw who endangered lives with his arrogance. Others call him a hero who filled the cracks left by a broken system. And some the truth lies somewhere in the quiet space between those labels. He was flawed, but he showed up. And in places like this, that's everything. You light a candle on the anniversary of his disappearance. Not to mourn, but to remember. It flickers in the window all night. And when dawn comes, the first knock at the door is already waiting. The next knock is from a boy, 11 years old, maybe 12, barefoot and covered in trail dust. He holds his little sister's hand, and she's clutching a faded pink stuffed bear that's missing an eye. They've walked for miles. You kneel beside them. He doesn't say much, just points at her belly, swollen and hot to the touch. Fever. Possible infection. You nod, guide them inside, and begin the work. Another day, another patient, another life saved because the clinic still stands. But later that evening, while you're bandaging a machete gash for a farmer who insists on telling jokes through gritted teeth, a woman walks in. She wears a white coat official, too clean, city shoes. She says she's from the Ministry of Health. She smiles like it's painted on, says she's here to evaluate the situation. You offer her tea. She doesn't drink it. She walks through the clinic, jotting notes on a sleek tablet, while your team keeps working around her. The cassava farmer shows her the wound cleaning station. The teenage assistant demonstrates sutures on a banana peel. You watch her nod, watch her eyes scanning everything like data. Then she turns to you and says, "You understand this isn't technically legal." You don't answer right away. Instead, you lead her to the patient records, carefully kept on lined paper, each with a name, or sometimes just a description, treatment, and outcome. You show her the wall chart. Vaccines administered, infections stopped, babies born safely. You point to the cupboard where expired antibiotics from government clinics are still labeled, "Discarded, do not use." And then you show her the makeshift sterilizer you built out of a pressure cooker, an old thermometer, and trial by error science. She doesn't say anything, but when she leaves, there's something different in her face. The smile's gone, replaced by something quieter. Respect, maybe, or guilt. You never hear from her again, but the inspections stop. You suspect someone up the chain stamped a report with the words, "Low priority." And you're fine with that. The phantom surgeon's legend evolves again. Now he's a ghost, a symbol, a whisper in every rural clinic running out of a garage, a church basement, a thatched hut. One day, you get a letter, an actual letter, crumpled and water-stained, with no return address. It's from someone calling herself just another ghost. Inside is a hand-drawn map. No names, no directions, just sketches of terrain, a red X, and the words, "He's teaching again." You don't believe it at first, but you can't shake it either. So a few weeks later, you pack a small bag medical kit, water, a photo of the clinic, and you follow the map. The journey takes 2 days. You cross streams, climb ridges, get lost once, almost twice. But then, just as you're starting to wonder if it's a wild goose chase, you hear music. A guitar, badly tuned, beautiful. And then you see it. A shack, nestled in the bend of a dry riverbed, smoke rising from a fire, Children laughing, and him. Older now, slower, but unmistakably him, the phantom surgeon. He doesn't react with surprise, just smiles and says, "Took you long enough." You laugh, you cry. You sit down and eat rice and beans cooked over an open flame. And then, without needing to say a word, he hands you a notebook. Inside, diagrams, case studies, notes on new methods, using even less equipment. "I've been experimenting," he says. "Didn't want to waste the time." You ask why he left without warning. He shrugs. "Wasn't my place anymore. It was yours." You stay a few days. He teaches a group of locals. You help. You update his notes. You show them how to build a makeshift IV drip using gravity and patience. When you leave, he hugs you, just once. Then, "Keep the circle going. They'll need you when I'm gone." You don't ask how long he thinks he has left. You don't want to know. Back at the clinic, things feel different, like a secret flame has passed to you. You share the new notes, update protocols, train new helpers. One night, the teenage assistant, now 19, almost grown, asks if the stories are true. "Did he really save a man using a shoelace and a fishhook?" You smile. "Maybe. And that's enough." Historians still argue about the ethics of what you're doing, the lack of oversight, the blurred lines between training and practice, but they don't argue about the results. In the 5 years since his arrest, your region's infection rate has dropped by half. Infant mortality is down. Emergency response time, even on foot, has improved dramatically. All without a single licensed doctor. You're not pretending anymore. You are the doctor now. And no, you don't have the certificate, but you have something better. You have a community that trusts you. You have a network scrappy, brilliant, under the radar of people willing to learn, teach, and adapt. And somewhere out there, there's still a man with a fading white coat and a backpack full of gauze, giving lectures to barefoot teenagers beside rivers and campfires. They call him O Phantasma, the ghost. And you're okay with that. You're the living part of the myth now. At night, after everyone's asleep, you sit on the porch and look at the stars. Same ones he used to point out during night shifts. And sometimes, just sometimes, you swear you hear a laugh, grainy, warm, echoing from somewhere deep in the trees. Morning begins the way it always does, roosters arguing, smoke curling from cooking fires, children laughing, coughing, running barefoot down red dirt paths. You stretch, step outside, and your back cracks like old wood. Too many nights sleeping upright in a chair next to someone hooked up to a homemade saline bag. You rub your eyes, take in the landscape, the green, the dust, the fog starting to lift. Another day, another 24 patients. But today is different. Today, there's a name you recognize on the list. Not from here, not even from the country. It's foreign, government sounding. Too many syllables to trust. You raise an eyebrow and glance toward your volunteer assistant. She shrugs. "Came in through the logging road," she says. Didn't talk much. You find him sitting at the edge of the waiting area, clutching a file folder that's way too clean. He stands as you approach. Young, nervous, polished shoes, but the dust has already claimed them. You guess Brasilia, maybe Sao Paulo, urban for sure. He smiles too fast. "I'm here for an interview." You blink. "This is a clinic." "I know, I'm not sick." He extends a letter, signed, official. He's with a university medical ethics committee, writing a paper on informal practitioners operating in underserved regions. You give him a long look. Then, maybe because you're curious or just exhausted, you let him in. The first hour, he's all questions. Voice recorder, tiny notepad, asking about your background, the clinic's origins, supply chains, emergency protocols. You answer sparingly. His tone is too eager, too rehearsed. Then he hits the wrong nerve. And how do you justify practicing without certification? You put down the gauze you were cutting. Walk over, look him square in the eyes, and you tell him. You tell him about the woman who would have died from sepsis if you hadn't learned to drain an abscess with a sterile needle cap and pure instinct. You tell him about the child who swallowed kerosene and lived, only because you'd seen the same thing 5 years ago and remembered the smell of panic. You show him the book stacked high on the back shelf, anatomy, pharmacology, notebooks filled with diagrams and careful notes from nights spent reading by candlelight, sweating through the tropical heat with a dictionary in your lap. He doesn't speak for a while after that. Later, you watch him sit in the corner while a birth takes place just 5 feet away. Breech, bloody, real. He pales, almost passes out. And you think maybe, just maybe, he understands now that medicine isn't always about credentials. Sometimes it's about being there. When he leaves, he says, "You should be studied." You smile. Already was, by ghosts. He doesn't get the joke, but you do. Because even now, years after your mentor disappeared for the second time, you still hear stories. Like the one about a healer in Colombia using river clay as a disinfectant. Or the group in rural Peru who built a centrifuge out of a salad spinner and bicycle parts. They all cite the same anonymous source. An old man with a cane, or a woman with silver hair, sometimes described differently, always sounding suspiciously alike. You collect these stories, write them down in your own notebook now. In the margins, you start to add sketches, ideas for new tools, patient triage charts, training modules that don't require electricity. Because the truth is, you're no longer just a field medic. You're the teacher now, and the students keep coming. Some arrive with nothing but a name and a recommendation scratched on torn paper. Others find you through whispers, like a rumor passed between truckers at refueling stations. One arrives on a bicycle, pedaling for 4 days straight. Says she read about you in a zine, published illegally out of Argentina. You don't even know what a zine is, but you welcome her anyway. She turns out to be brilliant. Within weeks, she's rewriting your wound tracking chart, color-coding it with scavenged crayons, so even the illiterate patients can follow it. The system saves time, saves lives, and you wonder briefly what could have happened if the phantom surgeon had been legitimized early on. Would he have gone farther, or would he have been buried by paperwork, boxed into rules too rigid to adapt? Historians still argue whether regulation could have absorbed him or simply crushed what made him great. But either way, his legacy has outgrown him. One night, a stranger arrives. He's old, half-blind. He walks with a cane carved from some jungle tree. Doesn't say much. You offer food, a place to rest. He just smiles and sets down a worn leather case. Inside, tools, real ones, steel, surgical grade, worn but cared for. And a note. 4 words, time to pass on. No signature, just a faded fingerprint in the corner. You don't cry, not right away. But later that night, as you clean the instruments, something breaks inside you, quietly, privately, because you know what this means. Somewhere, the ghost has finally gone still, but the work continues. You organize a memorial, simple and strange. A circle of lanterns, each lit in a different color. Each one for a life he touched through you, through others, through the long thread that ties makeshift clinics across continents. And in the middle, you place his old gauze scissors. No plaque, no grave, just that. Because ghosts don't need headstones, they need torchbearers. And that, now, is you. You begin keeping a calendar, even though days blur together. Not for appointments. Your patients come by instinct and desperation, not schedule but to mark moments, changes, milestones. Day 11. A young boy walks for the first time after you splint his leg with bamboo and torn bed sheets. Day 48. A mother delivers twins, one silent, the other screaming. You revive the silent one. She blinks at you, breathes. You don't sleep for 2 nights after that. Day 109. The new trainee accidentally gives the wrong dosage. A boy has seizures. You act fast, save him. The trainee cries. You don't fire her, you teach her again. The work evolves. Word spreads farther than you ever intended. People arrive not just to be healed, but to learn. Some stay. Others return home to their own regions, taking your improvised tools and jungle first aid wisdom with them. You begin compiling a guidebook, not for sale, just survival. Handwritten, water-stained, duct-taped together, titled, The Quiet Scalpel, Notes from Nowhere. It's filled with oddities, how to sterilize scissors with boiled guava leaves, how to recognize infection by smell alone, how to calm a child using only rhythm and breath. A fringe medical journal somehow gets a hold of a copy. They quote you anonymously. Call your work folk-informed tactical medicine. You laugh at the fancy phrasing, but admit it fits. Still, with the attention comes pressure. One morning, a man arrives in a tidy shirt, speaks Portuguese with a bureaucratic accent, and hands you a letter. You're being summoned. The Ministry of Health. He doesn't smile. Your heart sinks. It's finally happening. The reckoning. You tell your assistants, unsure if you'll return. They beg you not to go, but you must. The ghost never ran, he adapted. So, you travel. Buses, hitchhikes, even a short flight on a cargo plane. You arrive at a marble building that smells like old air and tension. Your shoes squeak on polished floors. Inside the hearing room, 8 officials, 1 microphone, and a lawyer who seems confused about how you're not already in jail. They read aloud your offenses: practicing without a license, distributing medical advice, operating a clinic with no legal standing. But they also read the testimonies, dozens of them, from villagers, local nurses, even one from a licensed doctor who secretly sent patients to your clinic when hospitals were overwhelmed. One council member squints over her glasses and asks, "Did you ever operate under the name Jose Dantas?" Your breath catches. You did once, briefly, as a joke, as a nod. They nod too, slowly, and you see it in their eyes. They know. They've been following the legend for years. "We're not here to prosecute," another says. "We're here to figure out what to do with you." You expect prison. Instead, they offer something stranger: collaboration. They want to fund a pilot program. Rural health hubs based on your methods. Staffed by hybrid teams, medics, trained volunteers, and 1 rotating official doctor. You laugh out loud. The idea is so ridiculous, it might work. "Can I still teach barefoot?" you ask. No one answers. But 3 months later, you're back in the jungle this time, with a modest budget and a line of visitors carrying notebooks and stethoscopes instead of machetes and bruises. The pilot site is set up in a repurposed schoolhouse. You teach by candlelight again, though now there's a solar panel powering 1 fan and a fridge for vaccines. You refuse the title doctor. Too heavy. Too final. You prefer facilitator, or medic, or just your name, because titles never saved anyone. The system grows. You hold monthly check-ins with the capital, over a dusty tablet connected by satellite. Bureaucracy moves slow, but strangely, they listen. Historians still argue whether this was the beginning of a new model of healthcare in the global south, or just an anomaly sparked by desperation. Either way, the results are undeniable. Child mortality in your region drops by 40%. Vaccination rates double. People live longer, walk farther, fear less. And amid all this growth, your thoughts return often to the phantom surgeon. You revisit the places he once wandered. One week, you hike up into the mountains where he once traded herbs with a shamaness, rumored to be 120 years old. She's long gone now, but you find the hut, still standing. Inside, a hand-carved mortar and pestle. You bring it back, place it beside your modern centrifuge, a museum of misfits. Another month, you speak at a university in Bahia. They treat you like a relic, a curiosity. But afterward, a third-year med student follows you out, eyes wide. "I want to learn what you learned," he says. You hand him your old notebook, the one patched with masking tape and salt stains. "Start here." Later that night, you write a new entry in your current one. Legacy is not what you build. It's who remembers to keep building. The next morning, you meet with an architect who's volunteered to help design a permanent clinic, solar-powered, earthquake-safe, accessible. He asks what you want it to be called. You hesitate. Then, simply, the ghost's hands. And he nods, like that's exactly right. That week, your supply truck is delayed. Again. You operate 3 times with thread from fishing line and disinfect with a mixture of lemon peel, moonshine, and prayer. You still carry the old scissors. You still sometimes hear whispers at the edge of the forest like someone watching, always just out of view. You've stopped being afraid of them. You hope he's watching. You hope he knows. And at night, when the lanterns are low and the frogs begin their chorus, you sit alone beneath the stars and trace the constellations. One looks like a scalpel, another like an open hand. You're older now. Not ancient, not fragile, but older in the way jungle vines get twisted, weathered, a little thicker, more stubborn. Your hands ache some mornings. A buzzing lingers in your ear after long days near the generator. But you're still here, and so is the work. The permanent clinic, the Ghost's Hands, stands proudly near the river bend, 2 kilometers from the original shack, where you once sterilized blades in boiling rainwater. It's painted white and green, with wide windows and a wraparound porch for waiting patients and wandering dogs. You don't wear a lab coat. You wear the same loose shirt, the same cargo pants with pockets full of gauze, tea leaves, and lollipops. Locals still call you Doubter Phantasma, the Phantom Doctor. Children whisper it like a dare. Elders nod as if saying it aloud gives them protection. But the clinic is no longer just yours. It belongs to everyone. There's a team now, real, trained professionals, and hybrid healers. A licensed nurse from Sao Paulo, a midwife from Venezuela who's seen more births than most hospitals, 3 volunteers from a medical university who are learning to make do with not enough and still save lives. You oversee, you stitch sometimes, but more often, you guide and teach, always teach. Today, you're showing the new recruits how to reset a dislocated shoulder without x-rays. You use a coconut shell, a ragged shirt, and a loud pop that makes everyone wince. The patient, an old fisherman, laughs afterward. "Better than the last time," he says, rubbing his arm. Then you're called to the porch. A woman is waiting, backpack slung across her chest, hands trembling slightly. She speaks fast, too fast, Spanish laced with Portuguese. You slow her down. Her sister is sick, far, far upriver. A 2-day trip. No boats willing to go. You nod and begin to pack. No matter how long you've been doing this, the rush never fades. The urgency. The quiet calculation of what to carry, what to leave behind. You pack antibiotics, antiseptic, a portable IV rig, and your weathered notebook. The journey is long. The canoe leaks. You're bitten twice, once by a spider you can't name, once by regret for not bringing more gauze. At night, the jungle sings. That thick, timeless soundscape of crickets, bats, and things that slither unseen. You think of the phantom surgeon again. You wonder where he slept when he was out in the wilderness. Did he find shelter in caves, hollow trees? Or did he sleep upright, like a ghost, vanishing with the morning fog? You arrive on the second morning. The girl, maybe 13, is pale, fevered. Dengue? Malaria? You test for both. Negative. You lean in, ask questions, listen to her lungs, feel the faint pulse at her wrist. You know what it is. Leptospirosis. The villagers have been bathing near runoff from the cattle pens. Infection spread fast here, unseen, unforgiving. You begin treatment immediately. Fluids, antibiotics, hope. By nightfall, her fever breaks. She sleeps. Her sister cries. You sleep too, in a hammock slung between 2 trees. For a moment, you dream of glass buildings and medical conferences, microphones and overhead projectors, but the dream fades fast, like morning mist. In its place, the ghost's face. Not as you saw him in the photo, stern, distant, but as he must have been, carving a path where no one asked him to. A flawed compass, pointing not north, but necessary. You return to the clinic 2 days later, to applause not for saving a life, but for coming back. Somehow, that still surprises people. News arrives soon after. The pilot program has expanded. 5 new clinics, then 10. Eventually, over 30, all across rural Brazil. Some under your model, some adapted, but all born of one idea. Healthcare doesn't wait for permission. You're asked to attend a symposium in Brasilia. You decline. Instead, you send a video message. Simple. Just you, in your hut, holding the first pair of scissors you ever used. You say, saving lives doesn't start with money. It starts with presence. The room, apparently, went silent. Somewhere in Europe, a think tank names your methods tactical minimalism. A new movement. You roll your eyes. But the next grant funds solar panels for 6 more clinics. So, you'll allow it. Still, not all is easy. The government changes. Budgets shift. Clinics close. You lose good people. Corruption gnaws at the edges. 1 month, you receive only half the medical supplies you were promised. You pivot. Train more locals. Stretch what you have. Pull out that old box of questionable herbs again. One day, a journalist visits. She's heard the legend. She wants to know what drives you. You say, regret, mostly. She blinks. Then you smile. But also, the stubborn belief that people shouldn't die because of geography. She asks about the phantom surgeon. Not a phantom, you reply. Just a man who chose to show up, even when he wasn't supposed to. Historians still argue whether he was a rogue, a savior, or something in between. Whether his impact justifies his methods. Whether legends like him and, by extension, you help or hinder the credibility of medicine. You're too tired to care. All you know is, people keep walking through your door. One night, a letter arrives by boat. No return address, no stamps, just your name, scrawled in trembling ink. Inside, a note, 5 words. He would be proud. L. You sit for a long time with that one. Eventually, you add it to your wall of oddities, right next to a bottle of expired morphine and a carving from a grateful patient that resembles a lopsided frog. The wall is full now. You consider adding on, but not yet. For now, you've got a patient with a rusted fishhook in her foot, a baby with a cough, and a team waiting for your nightly story round. And so, you keep going. The ghost fades, but the hands remain. It starts with a phone call you weren't expecting. One of those ancient wall-mounted units at the clinic, crackling like a dying insect. You pick it up, squinting through the static, expecting someone to ask for antibiotics, or directions, or a new battery for the village defibrillator. But it's someone else entirely. A woman with a clipped accent. São Paulo? Maybe? She identifies herself as a documentary producer, says she's working with an international team, and they're planning a series unsanctioned healers, folk medicine, rogue care workers. And yes, your name came up. You almost hang up. Almost. But she keeps talking. Says something that hooks you. We've tracked down people who met him. The phantom surgeon. We have interviews. Letters. Even one of his old operating kits. You say nothing for a while. Then you ask, did he ever have a license? There's a pause on her end. A polite kind of discomfort. Unofficially, no. But he did what needed to be done. You finish her sentence for her. And you agree to meet. 3 months later, they arrive in a motorboat with cameras and sunburn, and too many questions. You guide them through the village like a museum docent. Past the clinic, the garden, the photo wall, you don't show them the hidden drawer in your desk, the one with the bloodied bandana from 1994, the first time you ever had to cauterize a wound by fire. Some things remain yours. They film you in action, talking with patients, cutting gauze, scolding a med student for leaving the lid off the antiseptic, and then they ask you to sit for an interview. You're reluctant, but the interviewer, an older man with kind eyes and a notebook full of scribbles, starts gently. He asks you, when did you first hear the name Zé Arigo? You almost laugh, because it's been decades since anyone used the real name. Zé Arigo, born José Pedro de Freitas, a Brazilian faith healer from the 1950s who claimed to channel the spirit of a German doctor named Dr. Fritz. He conducted surgeries with rusty knives, bare hands, and zero formal training. Thousands lined up for his touch. He went to jail, twice. He also had one of the highest patient satisfaction rates ever recorded for a non-physician. The interviewer leans forward. You know they called him the original Phantom, right? You nod. He believed, truly believed that healing didn't come from him, that it was the spirits working through his hands. You shrug. I've met people who believe in worse things, he smiles. Do you believe it? That's the question, isn't it? Not just about Zé Arigo, but about all of it. You think about the baby who survived sepsis after you improvised a pressure chamber from a rice cooker and a rubber glove. You think of the boy who coughed blood for days until a shaman arrived, whispered over him, and the bleeding stopped. You think of the hundreds of times you were sure someone wouldn't make it, and they did. Historians still argue whether Arrigo was a fraud, a mystic, or a man ahead of his time. Whether his so-called psychic surgeries were real, or just brilliant showmanship wrapped around basic care. Whether his hands were guided by spirits, or simply stubbornness. I believe, you finally say, that if someone trusts your hands, you better make them worth trusting. The interviewer nods, scribbles something. Then, almost like an afterthought, do you ever think about quitting? You snort. Only every other Thursday. But then someone calls your name. It's the little boy with the broken arm from last week. He's brought you a mango, carefully peeled, a gift. You wave him over and give him your stethoscope to play with. And that's your answer. No, not yet. Later. In editing, the documentary crew cuts the segment into a neatly packaged 4 minutes of you talking while chickens peck in the background and a patient limps by with a smile. The documentary airs globally. They call it Healers in the Shadows. Your segment trends in France for a full week. Donations triple. You use the money to buy new solar batteries, upgrade the water filters, and install a hammock zone that doubles as a counseling space. Because healing doesn't always mean stitching someone up. Sometimes it's listening. Sometimes it's silence. Then, one evening, you receive a visit from a woman in a neat blazer and dusty boots. She's from the Ministry of Health. She says they've reviewed your case. You tense. She continues. There's talk of issuing you a license, an honorary one. You stare. She opens a folder. Inside is a document with your name, your photo, and a seal stamped in gold. It's not retroactive, she clarifies, but it recognizes everything you've done. You take it. Your hands don't tremble. She adds, it's optional, of course. You're not required to accept. You pause. Then fold the paper in half, tuck it behind your notebook and say, let me think about it. She nods, leaves. You never unfold it again. That night, you sit on the clinic steps, watching stars stitch themselves across the dark. The air smells like guava and iodine. Insects chatter. Somewhere nearby, a patient coughs once, then silence. And you think, it was never about papers, never about legitimacy. It was always about presence, about being here when no one else would. You pull your notebook closer, flip to a blank page. At the top you write, tomorrow's rounds. Then beneath it, check on Joao's leg, reorder gloves, fix leaking roof. Tell story of Arrigo to students. Because legends grow best in curious minds. And somewhere out there, another phantom surgeon is waiting for a reason to step forward. You might be that reason. You wake to the sound of the rain, the gentle, persistent kind that makes the metal roof sigh. It's the rainy season again. The trails will be thick with mud. You'll need your boots and that ridiculous poncho that makes you look like a half-drowned parrot. You smile anyway. There's always something comforting about the rain out here. Like nature's own version of anesthesia. It dulls the sharp edges of things, softens the screeches of the howler monkeys. Even the diesel generator seems to hum more quietly. You stretch, sit up, and then it hits you. Today's the day. The medical students are arriving, 6 of them, bright-eyed, fragile, sunscreened, clutching their first aid kits like sacred relics. They'll be here for a month. They'll learn how to treat foot rot, dengue, and bullet wounds with duct tape and faith. And they'll ask 1,000 questions. But today, they're just guests. And you are, somehow, the host. You boil water, shave over a metal bowl, dress in your cleanest shirt, which, granted, still smells faintly of iodine and papaya, and greet them at the dock. They're nervous, of course. One's already queasy from the boat ride. Another drops a bottle of hand sanitizer into the river. But by the time they reach the clinic, something shifts. The energy changes. They see the lines outside. The patients waiting, the kid on crutches, the woman balancing a sleeping baby on her back. And just like that, the students start to understand this isn't just a rotation, it's a reality check. They follow you as you begin rounds. First stop, a man with a snake bite. You ask what they do. One suggests anti-venom. You raise an eyebrow. Got any? Silence. Didn't think so. You show them how to wrap the leg, monitor breathing, and improvise a tourniquet that doesn't crush bone. Next, a young girl with an infected ear. They want to flush it. You nod, then hand them a syringe with salt water and point to the cracked mirror hanging near the sink. Do it. Carefully. Throughout the day, they whisper to each other. One asks, "Is it always like this?" You smile. This is a quiet day. At lunch, you finally sit down, hand them a bucket of boiled eggs and roasted plantains, and tell them the story, the real one. You start with Zé Arrigo Brazil's original phantom. Not a ghost, but a man of flesh and strange resolve. You describe how he claimed to be guided by the spirit of Dr. Fritz, a long-dead German surgeon. How he operated with kitchen knives and butter, yet somehow, patients walked away healed. Sometimes, you tell them how the government cracked down on him, how he was jailed, pardoned, jailed again, how people came from miles countries, even to be touched by his miracle hands. Historians still argue, you say, cracking open a boiled egg, whether Arrigo was a genius, a mystic, or a total fraud. The students lean forward. You continue, but I don't think it matters. They look confused, so you explain. What matters is, he showed up, every day. He saw people no one else saw, touched people no one else would touch. And maybe he helped them heal. A beat of silence. Then one of the students, braver than the rest, asks the question you've been waiting for. So, are you a phantom surgeon? You chuckle, loud enough to make the parrot outside squawk in protest. Depends on who you ask. You show them your old ID badge from the first clinic you were ever kicked out of. Then the honorary license from the ministry, still folded neatly, still unsigned, still untouched. You explain that no one asked you to stay here. No one appointed you guardian of the jungle. You just never left. Because people kept showing up, and so did you. Later that evening, you walk the students back to their quarters. Fireflies blink lazily. Somewhere in the trees, a frog croaks like it's trying to summon rain that's already fallen. You pause outside the clinic, look up at the stars. Then, almost without thinking, you say, "He used to sing, you know." The students glance back. Arrigo, before surgeries, just a few bars. Old hymns, calm the patients, calmed himself. One student asks, "Did it work?" You nod. Better than morphine. You don't mention the night you tried it too. The little boy with the shattered femur, how you hummed Ave Maria under your breath, hoping your hands would remember what they didn't yet know. He walks now, limping, sure, but he walks. The students head inside. You remain a little longer, then walk back into the clinic, where the generator hums and the smell of antiseptic clings to the air like a stubborn ghost. You check your notebook. Tomorrow, 3 wound checks, 1 prenatal, 2 malaria tests, and a tooth extraction that'll require more patience than pliers. Just another day in the shadow clinic, but you don't mind, because even shadows cast light, eventually. And you? You've always worked best in the in-between. The silent hours, the unlit corridors, the phantom places. So now, the storm's passed. The river slows to a gentle whisper outside your window, and the clinic, so often alive with noise and movement, settles into something quieter. The generator finally clicks off. The fan hums. You can hear your own breathing again. The students sleep, curled under mosquito nets, their first jungle shift behind them. Tomorrow, they'll ask harder questions. Tomorrow, someone else might need saving. But for now, just this moment, you allow yourself stillness. You step outside, barefoot. Let the damp earth cool your feet. Overhead, stars wink between slow-moving clouds. The trees drip rhythmically. The wind carries the faint scent of smoke and mango, and you feel held, not by any system or government or piece of paper, but by something quieter. The trust of those who've sat under your needle, the soft words exchanged on rain-heavy porches, the mangoes, the drawings, the thanks in tired eyes. You think about all the names people have given you. Doctor, angel, liar, saint, fraud. And then there's the one that always made you smile. Phantom surgeon. A whisper in the dark. A steady pair of hands. Someone who appears when no one else will. And just like that, the tension leaves your shoulders. Because no matter what the world says, no matter the debates in medical journals or the gossip in city cafes, you were here. You are here. Doing the work. One stitch, one story, one heartbeat at a time. So now, close your eyes. Let the hum of the fan carry you. Let the shadows soften. Let the breath come easier. You're safe now. You're home. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams.